For the last few months, the automobile sector has been very much in prime focus, perhaps not always for the best reasons, considering the pressure that you see on the space. But having said that, the India story still remains robust. There's still a lot of talk about the promise and potential that the market holds. And it's always great to get a lot of perspective on things like that, especially when you try and look at how India fits into global businesses for a lot of the international giants like Shell. Today we will be discussing that and more with Mansi Tripathy, who is the MD for Shell Lubricants in India. Great to see you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Siddharth, and wonderful to be here.
No, thank you for your time. And I know we've tried to do this for a while, so I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Let's talk about BS6.
Yes.
That is the next massive milestone for the industry. There's a lot of apprehension because while I think the technology or the manufacturing side of it, a lot of it that has been resolved, people are worried about pricing and what that might do to further put pressure on sales.
Yeah.
But once we get past all of that, from a usage point of view, as well as the new engines themselves, how are you targeting that specifically? Because one, there is going to be a lot of misinformation on the consumer side as well, and two, a lot of people are obviously going to buy these new vehicles. So how are you preparing yourself to also move into the BS6 regime?
Yeah, so some things are there, so you have to just ensure that you embrace and move on because it's the right thing for the environment.
Product-wise, you're already there.
Yeah, so product-wise, so the good news again on is this, being a global company, we have done it in Europe, we have done it in China, we have done it in US. So, so we exactly know what needs to be done and how do we actually work with OEMs on technology, on product management, on transition, and ensuring that we take the entire fleet together with us and not just the BS6.
Does that sort of become an immediate advantage for you, especially compared to the homegrown companies because of that global portfolio?
Thanks for saying that. Absolutely. And we're working with our OEM partners, say for example Daimler. So we have already been with their partner to have their next set of technology which is completely on BS6 and what will be the solutions looking like that.
They've already launched one BS6 car, as they say.
So I think that's in that sense there already, and then we are working with most of our other players as well to what their technology roadmaps are, and we can bring a suite from our portfolio. So it's not just one product, we have exactly different products basis their technology roadmap, if it is on fuel efficiency, whether it is on higher ODI, whether it is on cost of ownership, etc. So then we tag into their technology roadmap, get our portfolio, and then we are working with them in terms of, so it's actually more, it's beneficial for us. But what we are looking at is not just the product portfolio and the technology, but what all will be needed in our entire environment and ecosystem to make this happen and successful. So it's a lot to do with the mechanics getting trained. It's a lot to do with, as I said, how do you maintain your entire fleet, backward compatibility of our products, etc. So there's a lot more to it in terms of it than just saying, okay, April 2020 and we are going to shift. So we are helping to think through all the risks, all the mitigations which are needed, all the opportunity spaces. As far as the consumer is concerned, I think that is going to be an easy side of things because, for the consumer experience wise, it's not dramatically different from a point of view of usage. It's more from all the internal machinery which needs to undergo a change. But as you said, if you get past all of that, some of the pricing, it will get offset with some other things, and life will, will neutralize in that sense, and hopefully we'll get much more cleaner ecosystem in the country, which looks very exciting.
But just to clarify, then you do have a new set of products, let's say, that would go into the BS6 vehicles.
Yeah, and we've launched one even for the consumers. So we have a Remula R5, which is CK4 oil, which is a BS6 compatible oil as well. So we are just ensuring that we are timing it correctly. And some we are going ahead of time, some we are just ensuring that it comes just in time. So I think from a readiness point of view, both from a portfolio, trainings, OEM partnerships, project management, government policy. So I think there are multiple areas which we are working on.
The reason I asked that last question was because for you, in terms of just rolling all of this out, in terms of inventory, in terms of supply itself, it would be a little bit tricky because the transition is going to be an extremely slow one in terms of not people buying those new vehicles. New vehicles, of course, will be BS6. But the usage of the BS4 vehicles will continue for some time. So how do you sort of balance that out in terms of your actual supply?
Yeah, so I think again, careful, now we have very advanced forecasting models on that one. And if you look at the total vehicle park in the country, and then start dividing into what will be new, what will be still coming into aftermarket. So we have got sophisticated tools which help us do it by vehicle type. So we exactly know what's the manufacturing which will be coming in, and which are 1990 vehicles which are still in circulation and will potentially go off, etc., etc. So we have those detailed analytics. So we are very easily able to predict. And if most of our products, in fact all of our products, are backward compatible, so in that sense the risk of young usage is fairly low. Yeah, so then we are able to then ensure that we are giving that confidence to the consumer as well.
All right, so it's not a worry area then for you.
Yeah.
All right, now let's talk about EVs. Of course, the traditional engine oil won't be required there, but in that space there has, globally as well, Shell has spoken about doing a lot of work in that space, also partnering sometimes with some of the technology or OEM players. Shell India, what is your stance there? Is that an area that you see as being, if not an immediate, at least a mid-term sort of a potential area of business for you?
Yeah, so electric vehicles, again, something very good has to be there, and hence the real question is how do we leverage that trend, and how do we ensure that we are precipitating that in that sense. So one is like within the electric vehicle space, we do have now a range of electric vehicles fluid, because it's engine oil is just one part of it. You require a coolant. In fact, you require a very high duty coolant because of the energy which gets emitted, and then you require a whole lot of transmission oils and things like that. So there's a good set of portfolio of electric vehicles fluids, as we are calling, and that's something which we are continuously in fray again with OEMs, as well as will be ready to launch in due course of time. Second, we personally believe that we are not just working in the space of providing a lubricant, we are working in the space of reducing friction, right? So once you embrace that, then even in electric vehicle, there's a lot of friction in different parts. And then you embrace digital, and there's a lot of work which is at Shell we are doing in digital space. We can be real time telling the driver as to what is his driving habit, which is leading to a higher friction, right? And then can ensure that we are, so it, our gameplay can be in analytics and data rather than a product right now. So that's the second part of the whole thing. And then obviously then the third part is like, again, like for example, Mahindra, we are their official sponsors and partners in their e-racing. So we are participating in that space as well to co-engineer with them so that they succeed, learn from that experience and bringing back on the road. So, kind of like tying it in various spaces that, how do we participate and precipitate there?
One thing I should have also spoken about in the context of BS6 is for the diesel engines, despite what Maruti has said, the larger displacement engines needing possibly the urea solution, the AdBlue.
Yeah.
Specifically those engines and therefore those products that come with that, does that seem like a potentially interesting area for you? Because again, you possibly have an advantage there versus some of the smaller, not smaller, but homegrown players.
Yeah, so I think it will again become a part of the portfolio solutions.
Because that is something that you are already in.
Yeah, we do it internationally as well. But it requires a very sophisticated storage and, how do you logistically manage it? But if the OEM requires that as part of the portfolio solutions, then that can be provided and we can make it available much more readily as well. So again, it's part of the entire portfolio piece which I talked about. But more work has to be done in the logistical management of it, given some of the legal fiscal requirements on that.
But someone like a Mahindra, you don't have to name the player of course here because you have several partners, I understand, but where there is a large number of diesel vehicles in their portfolio, isn't that a conversation that's already happening? I mean, I'm guessing, especially for, like I said, the larger engines or the larger vehicles, it would be an inevitable requirement to meet the BS6 standard. Yeah.
So again, so the conversation typically is much larger than that. So it's not just petrol, diesel, it's then size, it's then capacity, it's like cost, and so on and so forth. So absolutely, these are the pertinent questions which are there. But where I'm seeing more conversations evolve is on total cost of ownership. So I think it's really more focusing on what will it take for the Indian consumer to evolve, and then how do we create those spaces. And then you work backwards to say, okay, what is the technology solution for that one? It can come through petrol, it could come through hybrid, it could come from diesel, etc., etc. Then all becomes like various choices, and I guess there is a good evolution which is happening on its own, given that sustainability is also at the heart of most of the OEMs.
In the next 2 or 3 years, do you think that could be an interesting business opportunity for you, AdBlue?
So it's one of the opportunities. I would say it's not
because
like
it's new. It's not something that exists
exactly.
today.
So it's an incremental and nice opportunity. As I said, we'll have to just explore all the elements of it to say, okay, how should we bring it, and how much of focus do we put in that.
You spoke about using a lot of forecasting
Yeah.
for your own business, but
Yeah.
inevitably you also would have to keep an eye on the automobile industry from a OEM perspective in terms of what's happening with their business, since it impacts yours. What do you see as your forecast there, given that nobody seems to have a clue what's happening right now?
Yeah, so no, I wish I had a crystal ball on this one, because I think we'll have to just see how things evolve, and there are too many drivers which we need to take into consideration. But having said that, I think there are a couple of constants still. The constants are that, while it will impact the first fill, which is, the immediate production, but that typically is only 10% of the larger requirement. There is still 90% of what we call it as, aftermarket, or the vehicles which are already in play, and potentially if this is slowing down, our commuting time, our time usage is not slowing down, which means that the rate at which the servicing needs to be done should either be same or increasing as we go along. And hence, in the larger demand from a lubricants point of view, the impact, at least in the short term, should not be a very, very dramatic one. Yeah, so that's point number one. The point number two is like, if you look at then the internal drivers for the same, and then you map it out in terms of, whether it is buying of the second vehicle, whether it is FX, whether it is the consumer disposable income, and then you start making some scenarios on best case and worst case on these. Honestly, the worst case is not that bad on some of those scenarios as well. So while there is, I would say, softness in that sense, I think the key for us is to work with those scenarios and then try mitigate some of the risks which are there, specifically as it concerns the shared mobility space, and then say, okay, what does longer term impact on some of those trends are going to be. And then for us is then, okay, how do we tap into some of those trends? So like, right now, 38% of most of the big manufacturers are usage for the shared mobility or the taxi space. So then the question for me was that, okay, what do we do with that information? So we have actually been launching a cab oil now, which gives you a higher performance, lower or no downtime, and then a higher ODI, because a shared cab then from a usage point of view, the idle time of a car in a house is completely eliminated or reduced very dramatically. So if a car in the house was getting used for say 5,000 kilometers over a month, cab will be getting used over 2 or 3 days, right? So then how do we increase the oil drill interval for that one and give then a cab usage a better experience, and can then be riding on some of those trends? So that's the third point, where irrespective of like, once we understand the underlying reasons, how can we then smartly work around those trends to ensure that, from our short term and long term growth, we are mitigating one trend versus another trend which is emerging.
People are going to think we planned this, because we've segued beautifully into the areas that I wanted to talk about. My last question was going to be about ride sharing and ride hailing services, and how much of an opportunity that provides to you, because obviously it's not something that's traditionally been looked at by brands like yours, but is now becoming more and more relevant. So you've already answered that question partly. Do you think that could only grow going forward, especially as it becomes more organized?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the further intrinsic trends behind that, which is affordability, which is convenience, which is more digitization and smartphones, etc. So if you then say, okay, where will that lead us? The answer is very clear that this trend is here to stay. And if you talk to millennials, they don't want to own a house, they don't want to own a car, they don't want to own anything in that sense. So you put all that information together. So then you say, okay, again, I told you one thing, which is okay, introducing a portfolio of them. We're also working in partnership, for example, with Uber, where their servicing, we are the preferred supplier along the way. So we have done a tri-party arrangement with a franchise workshop, Uber and us, and working with them to look at the future. And then we are also trying to work with them on their expansion plans and how can we be partnering with them in terms of driver education, value creation services on money and things like that as well. So there's a lot of work which is going on behind the scenes on that. But this trend, I would say, is going to be big and here to stay.
I was smiling because that was going to be my next question about do you work with the individual drivers, or then do you work with a brand like Uber or Ola or whoever else?
Yeah.
As more of these brands come in, though, do you think that it becomes natural for them to also reach out to players like yourself to make sure that they're ensuring a higher productivity of their own fleet?
Yeah, so I think where we can add a lot of value is with these aggregators in that sense. Then we are also working with aggregators who do the servicing. So they are close to, in our ecosystem, about 50-60 big entrepreneurs who have come in, who are doing this shared aggregation on servicing, and we're working with them as well. We are actually, one of them is part of our larger sponsorship from an innovation program as well, to then try and see where will it lead us from a point of view of better service at the end of the day, and then better reliability.
Which feeds back into the business,
so I think then it's a total package. We are even working with Amazon on models on the last mile delivery, so we don't just deliver the lubricant in their house, can we deliver the entire service? So again, it's a complicated 4-party arrangement with the distributor, with servicing, Amazon, and then us, to create an entire ecosystem where all of us come together that okay, when you click a lubricant, we also ask them, do you want it to be serviced? And if that gets clicked, then it in turn leads to a whole ecosystem. So I think it's really more about ensuring that while each of them individually might be a small trend today, but if the core or the kernel over there is something which is a long-term trend, then it's very important for us to at least experiment, pilot, learn, and be in the game, so that we can scale up or down depending on where it goes.
It could explode. So absolutely right. So that about does it. Thank you. It's been a pleasure speaking with you today, and also getting to know about some of the new areas that you're now focusing on. Continue to, of course, surprise us with further innovations and products. Thank you again.
Absolutely my pleasure to be here, and look forward to more conversations.
Likewise.
Thank you.